Hello, everyone. Just as another reminder, we're just waiting a couple more minutes just for others to join the webinar. We will begin shortly. Alrighty, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and begin. Before we begin, we're going to go over a quick maintenance items and some introductions. My name is Gilbert Lopez. I'm one of the full-time staff clinicians at the Texas State Counseling Center on main campus, located on the 5th floor of the LBJ Student Center. First off, I want to thank y'all for penciling some time in your busy schedules to join us today and have a good discussion over a very current topic, emotional intelligence, the B.O.K.O IQ. And so this topic is something that is very, very present. We always hear, statements such as, I wish I could control my emotions, manage my emotions, better regulate my emotions. And hopefully with today's discussion, I'm able to provide y'all with a good foundation of knowledge and awareness as far as, what emotions are, what their functions are and their purpose, but also how to better regulate them, how to cope with them in the moment, especially when the intensity is like 0 to 100. And so although everybody experiences emotions, everybody experiences them differently. And so as we go through our discussion today, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box in this webinar. I will try to do a couple of coordinated pauses throughout the discussion to make some time for those questions. But my goal is to be respectful of your time and to use our time to our full potential today. As you can imagine, with this discussion, it is very broad, right? The emotions, the how we cope, it's a very broad subject. There's a lot of information. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and begin. All right, so just a brief agenda. We already went over introduction. And so some of our primary goals is to review the B.O.K.O IQ. And so for many of you, y'all are probably saying like, what is that? What does that mean? It's an acronym that we are gonna go over and review. We're gonna go over emotional intelligence and also what does that mean and how we can use that to our benefits. And then provide you with some skills, some coping skills. So not only are we gonna have content, but we're gonna have actual applicable skills that you can utilize in those moments when those emotions are like 0 to 100. And so our goals. Our goals for today is hopefully when you leave today's webinar that you'll have a better understanding and labeling and naming your own emotions that you experience, decreasing unwanted emotions, but also increasing positive outcomes and positive emotions. And so just kind of as a pause for right now, to utilize that Q&A box and what do you hope to learn today? So please take a couple of moments. I'll give you like 30 seconds and just type in, what do you hope to learn today and hope to get out of today? And I'll give you 30 seconds and then we'll read some of those questions and I'll provide some responses. Okay, so some of the comments that are coming in is how to regulate emotions in a healthy way. And so we will definitely touch on that during this webinar. So you came to the right place for that. Another one is, I want to control my stress better. And so emotions correlate with stress. They almost go simultaneously. If we're angry, if we're upset, well, then we're going to feel stress, right? We're going to feel that adrenaline pumping, especially with anger, right? When we get angry, we get adrenaline going, we've got all these other hormones going. And so that has a stress response within our body. And if we're angry for an X amount of time, then that could definitely take a toll on our body and our well-being. Perfect. Thank you for participating and providing some goals. Okay, so the first part, where do we start? What is emotional intelligence? So it is the ability to understand, use, and regulate your own emotions in positive ways to relieve distress. So relieving stress, but also to communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. You could probably pick up the theme that emotions are tied in with communication. And so that's something many individuals aren't aware of, is that one of the main functions for emotions is to communicate. And we'll go over that a little bit more in depth in the following slides. How can we implement this acronym B.O.K.O IQ to increase our emotional intelligence? And we will also go over that more in depth. Okay, so what is the B.O.K.O IQ? And so as I mentioned, B.O.K.O is an acronym, stands for behavior, observation, knowledge, and outcomes. And so let's break that down a bit. So behavior, what do we do in the moment? And also quick pause. If y'all want to take a picture of this slide, I would highly recommend it. But feel free to take a picture of this slide if you would want to. And so behavior, what do we do in the moment? Do we respond versus react, right? There's a difference there. When we react, it's coming from a place of impulsiveness, immediate urge or desire that we feel uncomfortable in the moment and we don't agree with it. So we need to do something right then and there to fix it. That's reacting. In the moment, impulsive. Sometimes, people might say, like, I was reactive, and the way I know I was reactive is because I regretted it a couple of days later when I thought about it and I reflected on it. Respond is responding to the situation from a lens of problem solving, developing a solution, but not only developing a solution, but one that is tied to your goal for the situation. Sometimes we get caught up in right versus wrong versus what is my goal here overall. And then, is what we do helpful or does it make the situation worse? Based on my current actions in the moment, when I'm impulsive, does it make it worse? Or does it help me reach my goal and it diffuses the situation? So behavior. Observation. What thoughts do we notice? What thoughts are popping up? How come they haven't texted me back? This thought makes me feel uncomfortable. Am I not important to them? Right? We start to notice our thoughts. Then we start to notice what urges and desires become present. What do I feel like I need to do in the moment? And you can see how that's tied to behavior. And then also too, what physical sensations do you notice? When we're happy and elated, we feel warm, we feel excitement, we feel peace, we feel relaxation, calmness. When we feel sad, our back feels heavy, our knees feel weak. When we're angry, we feel tension in our shoulders. We notice that we begin to put our fist into a ball and we feel that tension when we're angry. So noticing your physical sensations. Knowledge. What triggers or prompting events occurred? So what led to this moment? labeling our emotions. So labeling what I'm feeling right now. And this is very important, that we label what we feel, but then we verbalize it in the moment. And you'll notice when you verbalize an emotion in the moment, the intensity will automatically go down. It's a quick little trick. And so if I'm feeling sad, I say, I'm feeling sad. If I'm angry, I'm feeling angry and frustrated right now. Say it out loud. And then what is the most effective response right now? And so brainstorming. And that's where you kind of see that problem solving and solution finding occur. What is the most effective response in this moment? I might not agree with it. It might be unfair to me. But what is my objective here? Then outcomes. So what is my goal of the situation, right? What am I trying to get out of this moment? You know, utilizing what emotion I felt. And so how do I find a solution to that? And then what is a healthy and beneficial response? And then finally, coping in the moment. So as I mentioned, towards the end of this webinar, I'm gonna provide a couple of coping skills that you could utilize to bring down the intensity of the emotions. Because when we bring it down from 0 to 100 to maybe like 0 to 40, 0 to 50, it's a little bit more manageable. And we might not make impulsive decisions as much. We have a little bit more control over the situation. All right. So our emotional intelligence IQ. And this is where I will be providing just some basic foundation knowledge on what emotions are, their functions, you know, and their purpose. And so what do emotions do? And so emotions are a part of the human experience. We can't get rid of them. They're ingrained in our DNA through evolution, survival purposes. Like for example, fear. If we didn't have the emotion of fear, we might not be that much of a successful species, right? We would be like, oh, look, a lion, let me go pet it, right? So, you know, there's a reason why we have certain emotions. It's a part of the human experience. And the thing with emotions, you know, we can't get rid of them. Some people say they want to control them. The way I describe it is to better regulate them, to better experience the emotions, to ride the wave of the emotion versus going up against it. You know, kind of picturing like yourself in the middle of the ocean, right? And waves are just coming in, the emotions. Are you gonna have a better experience going with the waves and the currents or trying to stand your ground? Because eventually you're gonna get washed away. And so again, emotions are part of the human experience. And it's all about how we could better regulate them effectively to meet our goal. Emotions motivate and organize us for action. So for example, like fear, right? They motivate us and organize us for our response. If we see a lion, we're gonna run away, right? If we go to our favorite restaurants, we're gonna feel happy and be like, oh, I wanna go eat that tonight, right? So it motivates us, it organizes us to respond to action. Most importantly, emotions communicate to others. Emotions communicate to ourselves. And so the functions of emotions is deeply rooted in communication, making connections, communicating to the other person effectively what you're feeling, what's going on, what your body is telling you. In this webinar, we're communicating through language, right? Which is located in our brain. Our body, the way our body communicates through emotions. And so this allows us to communicate to our friends, our family, our peers, you know, what's going on in the moment. And this is something I would write down and highlight. When you experience emotions, view them as signals, not commands. View them as little light bulbs going off, not an order to do something right then and there. because it's when we follow and respond to emotions through commands that most of the time it makes the situation a little bit more unpleasant and it contributes to the stress. But if we view them as signals, we're able to acknowledge what's going on. We're able to validate. We're able to experience them and let them run their course. And so when it comes to the more overwhelming emotions, right, the ones that are the 0 to 100, right, the first one that probably comes to mind is like anger or fear. And so I describe emotions, especially when they're intense, as like a storm cloud. In the moment, the storm is very intense. There's lightning, there's thunder, it's chaos. But what happens after a while? The storm breaks apart and moves on. And that's how we have to view emotions, that even though they're intense, the more we fight them, it's going to keep that storm cloud there. The more we try to push them away and not talk about our emotions, it's going to keep the storm cloud there. And when we validate, we express, and then if they're really overwhelming, we cope, it allows the storm cloud of emotions to run their course and move on. And so with emotions, I always like to talk about common myths with emotions. These myths are things that are ingrained in society, cultural norms, that how we should view emotions. However, living in an individualistic society where everybody's kind of on their own, that could create some barriers, especially if emotions are meant to communicate to others, right? And so some common myths. Letting others know what I'm feeling is a sign of weakness. One of the biggest myths out there. I would challenge that. Letting others know what I feel is a sign of weakness. For example, the emotion of sadness. So sadness is an emotion that comes up when we lose something of great importance, we lose someone, we miss out on a big life event, we fear that we might lose someone, we feel sadness. But the function of sadness is not only that, but to communicate to others that we need help. And so if we're doing the opposite of what the function of sadness is, then that prolongs the sadness. That increases the stress. That's why sometimes instead of being sad just for maybe a couple of moments or maybe a day, the sadness lasts for weeks or months. Because the purpose of sadness is to communicate to others that we need help, we need support. But if we're not doing that, we're buying into this myth, then you can see how that plays a unique variable in the situation and creates more difficulties with that experience. The next myth, painful emotions should be ignored. Painful emotions, again, emotions are a part of the human experience. And so there's a difference between pain and suffering. There's natural pain, right? One that comes to mind is, grief and loss, right? Losing of a loved one. It's a part of life. That's natural pain, increased natural sadness. But if we ignore it, we're not validating it, and it's going to stay there and become even more overwhelming. Another one is it's inauthentic to change emotions. So if we're feeling a distressful emotion, it's overwhelming, maybe I should focus on a more pleasurable emotion, such as happiness, joy. So if we're in the moment and let's say we get a poor grade on a test, right? We're going to feel down. We're going to feel sad. But instead of staying in that, what we can do is be like, all right, this test does not define me. And I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A or something to boost our mood, right? And prepare for the next test. Because although we did not do good in this one test, we still have 4 other ones in this class. And so instead of getting stuck in the sadness and the guilt and the shame, we produce that happiness, that joy. We improve our mood by doing things that we enjoy. Another myth is emotional truth is what counts versus factual truth. And so emotions could at times be very deceptive. If we feel a certain thing, then that must be true, right? No, not necessarily. We have to, you know, make sure we are aware that what is actual reality and facts versus what I feel like. Because for some people, right? For some people, we're our toughest critic, right? And so if we always feel like I could do better, but when we look at the facts, you have straight A's, right? You have to weigh the emotional truth versus the factual truth. And it's when those individuals tend to skew to reacting to the emotional truth, that's what causes the most distress and most difficulties. So we have to make sure that we put a spotlight on the facts, what's actually going down. This is my reality. Yes, I didn't do a good, yes, I didn't get a good grade on this exam, but I got 3 more. I got 4 more. This is 1 class out of 5 that I'm taking this semester, right? And so using those facts to help bring down the emotions. And then another myth is my emotions are who I am. So if I'm angry, well, then I'm an angry, mean person. No. What we do need to figure out is where is this anger coming from, right? As I mentioned earlier, everybody experiences emotions, but each one experiences it at different intensity. Each one of us in this webinar today, we have our own life values, our own beliefs, opinions, past life experiences. And so we have to keep all of that at the forefront when we're focusing on our emotions. And so taking another pause right here, in the chat or in the Q&A box, do any of these myths or anything that I've shared so far relate to you? Or does anything really stick out that you feel comfortable like sharing? And I'll give you another 30 seconds. Again, do any of these myths stick out? Or do any of these relate to you? All right, go ahead and move on if no one has any responses. Okay, so I do have another response or two that came in. So that one myth, the sign of weakness when we express our emotions. Yes, that's one that comes up a lot, right? You kind of look at our society, very individualistic. It's looked down upon to ask for help, right? Exactly. Yeah, thank you for those responses. All right. So again, the 3 major functions is to motivate, communicate to ourselves and others. There's a purpose for emotions. And I like to use this graphic. You have brain talking to the heart. See, isn't that better? And the heart is a little hesitant. He's like, yep, and we're bearing our emotions. If you notice, emotions are still there and they do not like to be buried. All righty. And so emotions can be signals to check things out, right? That's what it's meant to, that's what it's meant by saying, listen to your gut, right? This is a feel-good situation. We're referring to those emotional signals. Information about situations, again, based on emotions, may or may not be accurate. Treating emotions as facts leads to more difficulties. When carried to extremes, emotions can be treated as facts. Like for these 2 examples, I feel incompetent, so I am incompetent. If I feel right about something, it is right. And so I'll use an example. Let's say we are driving down the highway, right? And someone cuts in front of us and drives recklessly. We get upset, we get angry, right? Some of us experience road rage. And then we say to ourselves, oh, that's a bad driver. Or we might even say like, oh, I should do better. I should be aware of my surroundings and the drivers around me, right? And we internalize that. We get angry or we feel guilty and shame. But what if we later learn that person who cut in front of us in traffic was racing to the hospital because they were taking a loved one there for an emergency? Well, then that changes everything. And that's why it's important not to treat emotions as facts, because at times they can be misleading and false. And so decreasing the frequency of unwanted emotions. So we're not going to get rid of all emotion. That's impossible. But we can do things in our environment to decrease those unwanted ones. And we could do that in several ways. We could stop the unwanted ones from starting. So although we can't, again, control or stop them all, we can make changes in our environment and in our life to reduce how often we have these negative emotions. And so if we're maybe in an unhealthy relationship with someone, right, being in an unhealthy relationship is going to cause distress. That's going to lead to more of those unwanted emotions. So what are some changes and life choices I can make to decrease that frequency of unwanted emotions? Change them once they start, right? We kind of talked about this already. Not believing the myths, right? Going against those myths of emotions. So we want to make sure that we validate them, we express them, and then we cope with them. So validate, express, and cope. Emotions are neither good nor bad. They just are, right? They're just responses to our environment. As I mentioned, every emotion has a purpose. But it's when we begin to judge, that's when it becomes unhelpful. We begin to judge such as, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Oh, I'm a bad person. Because when we begin to judge, we begin to automatically assume blame that we did something wrong. And then again, suppressing emotions. Suppressing emotions is a temporary solution. It's like a Band-Aid. If we suppress them, it might cause temporary relief in the moment, but long-term, it's still there. And they're just going to build up and build up and build up. So it's important that we don't suppress emotions. When we regulate emotions, it's for ineffective emotions only. So ineffective. So a lot of these coping skills, the B.O.K.O method, it's for ineffective emotions only. Because at times, emotions might be valid, right? We talked about how we might misinterpret our emotions, but what about those situations where, yeah, someone did, piss me off. Someone did betray me. Someone did something that made me feel sad. So there's times where, yes, emotions are valid. And so we know emotions are valid when our emotions, we're acting in our own self-interest, right? When we express them, we're getting closer to our goal, right? And that's very important. When emotions pop up, what is our goal for the situation? Expressing emotions influence others. So when we express emotions and that influences another person and they reciprocate it back, is that helpful? And if so, that's an effective emotion in the moment. And then also when you're sending a message that you need to be listened to, right? Like sadness, we talked about, that we need help. That's how we know emotions are valid. So when we decrease our vulnerability and increase that emotional resilience, that emotional intelligence, we're able to bounce back quicker. We're able to cope with difficult events and emotions without them getting worse. So we decrease emotional suffering. And so the thing with pain and suffering, as I mentioned earlier, right? Pain is natural. Pain is going to happen in life. Suffering, we are stuck and we're not able to allow that emotional cloud to move on. That cloud stays there and those emotions are intense. Reducing suffering when painful emotions overcome you. And then also manage extreme emotions so you don't make things worse, right? It happens to all of us. Sometimes we get caught up in the moment. And a couple of days later, we're like, man, I shouldn't have responded that way. I shouldn't have said that. Okay. And so some common emotions, and we could spend, numerous hours talking about each individual emotion, how to cope with them in a healthy manner. Again, this is very foundation. And so I wanted to give you a brief snapshot that helps us have a better, mindset of why I'm experiencing this emotion. And so if you want to take a picture of this as well, I recommend that. So the first one, fear. It organizes our responses to threats, to our life, to our health, our well-being. It focuses on escaping from danger, such as, that example where I mentioned, like, let's go pet a lion, right? No, let's not do that. Anger, that organizes our responses to the blocking of important goals. So if we have a goal and then something blocking that, we're going to get upset. It also activates us to respond to imminent attack, right? Us going into self-defense mode, like someone's wronging us, someone betrayed us. It focuses primarily on self-defense, right? Disgust organizes our responses to situations and things that are offensive and contaminating. Sadness organizes our responses to the losses of someone or something important and to the goals lost or not attained. It focuses on what is valued and the pursuit of goals, as well as communicating to others that we need help. Again, one of the main goals of sadness is to communicate to others that we need help. And one of the biggest barriers we see is sometimes we give into those thoughts, right? I don't want to ask for help because I feel like I'm a burden. They don't have time for me. But then I ask you, what if this was the other way around? Wouldn't you want to know a friend was in distress, a family member needed your help? And so that's where the function of sadness plays out. Because again, all of our emotions are rooted in communication. Shame organizes responses related to personal characteristics or our own behaviors that dishonor the social norms, that dishonor the community. We did something that violates that, right? Guilt organizes responses related to specific actions that have led to the violations of values. So we did something wrong, and so we feel guilty about it. And so the way we overcome guilt is we find a solution to it, right? We try to undo our wrong. And if we did do something wrong, we try to find ways that repairs it to where it's back healthy and good. Jealousy organizes responses to others who threaten or take away our relationships or things that are important to us. So we get jealous when we fear that someone else or something is taking important things from us. And then it turns into us to protect what we have. And so jealousy, especially in relationships, can be very intense. Love, another very intense emotion, organizes our responses to, again, survival, reproduction. It focuses on attachment, security, and the union with others. Happiness organizes our responses to optimal functioning to ourselves, right? Being a part of the social group. It focuses on continuing an activity that enhance pleasure and add personal or social value. And so happiness is what we want to increase, especially if we're on that other end of the spectrum of emotions that are a little bit more heavy. And so I'm gonna take another pause right here. So in the Q&A, what's some emotions that cause you distress? Or do any of these, or do you have any questions regarding certain emotions? And I'll give you about 30 seconds. Again, remember to submit these in the Q&A function. Any questions regarding any emotions, anything specifically regarding to your experience? All right, we'll continue to move on. And so if y'all could let me know if you could hear the video. So this is a small clip from Inside Out. It's a Pixar movie. Really depicts very well emotions, the functions of emotions. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it. If you cannot hear it, please put that in the Q&A.
Here we go. All right, open.
This looks new.
Think it's safe?
What is it?
Okay, caution. There is a dangerous smell, people. Hold on, what is that?
This is disgust. She basically keeps Riley from being poisoned, physically and socially.
That is not brightly colored or shaped like a dinosaur. Hold on, guys. It's broccoli! Well, I just saved our lives. Yeah, you're welcome.
Riley, if you don't eat your dinner, you're not gonna get any dessert.
Wait, did he just say we couldn't have dessert?
That's anger. He cares very deeply about things being fair.
So that's how you want to play it, old man? No dessert? Oh, sure. We'll eat our dinner right after you eat this.
Right, here comes an airplane.
Oh, airplane. We got an airplane, everybody.
Yeah. Any initial thoughts based off of this video and what we've discussed so far? Again, I'll give you about 30 seconds to put something in the Q&A. All right. So the next part is, all right, the B.O.K.O method, right? The acronym. How can we use this? You know, we really broke it down in that slide earlier from the beginning of what it meant, you know, what the B.O.K.O method is. And so with that, behavior, observation, knowledge, and outcomes. All right, so I kind of filled it in already, and we're going to walk through it together. And again, this is something I would recommend maybe taking a picture of and utilizing this on your own to use it as like a practice template with improving, you know, our reactions to emotions, you know, emotion regulation. Because as I mentioned earlier, we cannot get rid of emotions, but we can decrease the frequency. And so with that, you know, we have each category. And so I kind of came up with an example scenario. And so if you look at the bottom row, oh, why did that happen? That was weird. Anyway, if you look at the bottom row, you would see that under knowledge, that category, the emotion that I picked was anger. And I'm angry because my partner did not call me back. You know, they didn't text me back. They left me on red. And so that upsets me. And so when that happens, we're going to go to behavior. And so what do we do in the moment? Do we try calling them numerous times? Do we try texting them out of frustration? If so, ask yourself, is this responding or is this reacting? And then if so, is this impulsive action helpful? You know, empathizing, you know, if you were in the other end of this, you know, let's say you were in class, that's why you weren't able to text back or answer your partner's call. And then you get out of class and you see like 20 text messages and 10 phone calls, right? How's that going to make you feel? Right? And so it's very important, right, that we ask ourselves, you know, are we reacting? Are we responding? And then is this helpful or not helpful? our observations, right? What are our thoughts? What do we notice? So we have thoughts that start to pop up like, oh, I'm maybe not that important. Are they with someone else? What urges or desires become present? I need to contact them right now. And then what physical sensations do you notice? Again, noticing like these warning signs, right? Well, my body feels tense. I notice the body temperature increasing. My heart rate is increasing. So we're starting to break down this situation. And then we get back to knowledge, right? What is the most effective response? And so that will look different for every relationship. You know, I could be having a conversation regarding expectations with communication. It could be sharing, you know, a class schedule. Be like, look, you tried to call me when I had class. How's the family, right? And so having a conversation with your partner could be an effective strategy. And so now we get to the last column, outcomes. So what is my goal in this situation? My overall goal is I want to have that connection, right? I want them to text back. I want to hear from them. That's my goal. And so is calling them 10 times and texting them 20 times, is that healthy? Probably not. So what is a healthy and beneficial response? Maybe that's one call and one text message. Hey, when you're free, give me a call back. And even in those moments, we're still going to feel pretty intense, right? Those emotions, depending on each individual, can be different in intensity. And so that's where coping comes to play. And so we're going to go over some basic coping skills. So coping skills, right? I always use this graphic as well. Why am I always so tired? And the brain is like, well, we don't sleep enough. We have poor diet, dehydration, not enough exercise. And then we ask ourselves, if only there was something we could do about it. Go to bed earlier, eat healthier, go for a walk, brain says. But then we still kind of get into that routine of, oh, well, I did all I could. There's nothing I can do. And then our brain is like, okay, well, we can do something. And that's where these coping skills come into play. So the first coping skill is the acronym PLEASE. If you want to take a picture of this as well, you can. So the acronym PLEASE. P stands for treating physical illnesses. So when we're sick, we're more vulnerable to negative emotions, right? If we're sick, then we're probably a little bit more irritated, agitated. The healthier we become, the better we're able to regulate our emotions. Have a balanced diet. So try to eat different well-balanced foods that don't keep us too hungry, right? Because there is such a thing as hangry, right? When we're hungry and we're angry. So we want to make sure that we're making meals and that we're eating a good balanced diet. You know, as a college student, right? You know, fast food is very efficient, but we want to make sure that's not our diet 24/7. We want to make sure we cook a bit. We implement some greens, some vegetables, so having a good balanced diet. Avoid mood-altering substances. So alcohol, drugs, staying away from that. You know, alcohol is what we label as a depressant. So if we're feeling sad, when we drink alcohol, or if not that day, the next day, that sadness is going to be even more intense. So staying away from substances that will alter our mood. That balanced sleep. You know, it's important that we get a good amount of sleep. You know, usually between 7 to 9 hours, but then also more importantly, keeping a consistent schedule. So having a bedtime routine, right? A time where you could decompress for the day. Stay away from your phone, from TV. Do something that helps increase relaxation. And then on the flip side, a time where you wake up, where you have a good bedtime schedule. You know, you wake up every morning and you have a wake up routine. Get some coffee, brush your teeth. Our brain loves routine. Then also get exercise. Cardio, again, cardio done consistently is our own natural form of antidepressant. The neurotransmitters and hormones that are produced in our body biologically improve our mood when we exercise. So the first one is the PLEASE acronym. The next coping skill is the acting effectively coping skill. So what this is, it's more of like a perspective, a cognitive like perspective coping skill, way to view something from a different angle, right? It's doing what works to achieve our goal. The goal here is to focus on doing what works, rather what is right versus wrong or fair versus unfair. Okay, so we're only focused on achieving our goal. So trying to prove someone right in the moment might make us feel good in the moment, but in the long term, getting what we want in life is more satisfying. So using the acting effectively skill allows us to reach our goals, reduce suffering, and increase happiness. Because again, we're focused on the outcome, not what is right versus wrong or fair versus unfair. And so yeah, this skill could be a little difficult, but with practice, just like with any skill, whether it's learning an instrument, playing a sport, practice makes it more efficient. And so an example for this skill, let's say you go to a hotel, right? You get to the reservation desk and they don't have your reservation, right? That will make us upset and angry. You might want to yell, right? Get upset, maybe cause a scene. But is that effective? Or is it the opposite? Maybe we should be like, okay, so what solutions do you have for me? Right? What room can you help me find that's nearby? Because the overall goal is to get our hotel room, not focusing on you lost our reservation or not. Was it unfair? Was it wrong? Yes, it was. But again, this skill is more of a changing our perspective, our angle on how we view things. Coping skill number 3. It's called the tip skill. So tipping the temperature of your face with cold water, intense aerobic exercise, paced breathing, impaired muscle relaxation. Each skill has the effect of rapidly changing your biological response patterns and thereby causing a reduction in your emotional arousal. So if we're able to change the temperature and body chemistry in our body with the tip skill, then our emotional arousal is going to automatically reduce. And so that intensity of emotions in the moment is going to come down to where it's a little bit more manageable. The tip skill is very fast and works within seconds. So let me go ahead and play this video to provide a brief overview of this skill.
Are you at your emotional breaking point, about to do something you might regret? Remember the DBT skill TIP. TIP stands for temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, and paired muscle relaxation. When you're feeling upset, try changing your body temperature. Splash your face with cold water or hold an ice cube to focus your mind on something else. Engage in some intensive exercise, such as sprinting or a good workout at the gym, to help increase oxygen flow to the brain and reduce the anxiety and stress you feel. Paced breathing will stop the fight or flight shallow breathing response. Breathe in with your diaphragm, taking in air for 6 seconds. Hold for 7, then breathe out 8. Pause 4 seconds, and then start again until you feel more calm. This can be done with any breathing exercise. Focus on a group of muscles, like your arms, and alternate between tightening and relaxing the muscles. Paired muscle relaxation helps you let go of the tension in your body by relaxing your muscles. These skills can bring you down from your emotional ledge, so
again, this coping skill, really targets our biology, right? To help reduce that emotional arousal. And then the final coping skill is the acronym STOP. So when emotions take over us, we might act impulsively, right? We say something we regret. And so to be able to use our skills, we need to stop in the moment to help us control our response in the moment. Because again, we're trying to respond and not be reactive. And so for stop, do not just react, freeze, don't move a muscle. Your emotions might try to make you act on the moment, but stay in control. T, take a step back, take a break and let go. Take a deep breath. Do not let your feelings make you act impulsively. Observe. Notice what is going on, the inside and outside. What is the situation? What are my thoughts? What are these emotions and feelings? But then also, what are the other people saying? What are they doing? What's the reality of the situation, right? The facts. And then proceed with awareness. When deciding what to do, consider your thoughts and other people's thoughts and feelings. Think about your goals of the situation. What actions will make it better or worse? And so again, with the stop skill, it's all about taking a breath in the moment and not being reactive, but allowing us the opportunity to be responsive in a manner that allows us to achieve our objective and our goal of the encounter or situation. All righty, so I know we're approaching the end of our time. That was a lot of information. I hear y'all. Like I said, this is something that is delivered actually over a year and a half. This intervention that I pull a lot of this information from is called DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And a lot of that content is delivered to clients and patients over a span of like 12 to 16 months. And so hopefully with our discussion today, we were able to at least get some foundation and some helpful coping skills and methods to kind of really improve your chances of regulating emotions in a healthy manner. So again, thank you, and we'll shift to the Q&A. Any questions or any final thoughts for today's webinar? And then just as a reminder too, the Counseling Center, we do offer workshops and groups, and the B.O.K.O Emotional Intelligence Workshop focuses on this, but we take it to another notch, another level. So if this is something that you're interested in, the beginning of next semester, give our office a call during the fall semester and let them know that you are interested in the B.O.K.O group. And again, we will be diving into all of these topics a little bit more, and we'll have more private space to really dissect all of these concepts and coping skills, but also really polish these coping skills on a weekly basis. So again, it's the B.O.K.O Emotional Intelligence Workshop. So some questions that are popping in. Definitely, we can better understand our actions when we identify what is the root emotion, right? So we're responding in a way that is tied to anger, but we're really feeling sad. That is like a little light bulb. Like, hey, maybe I should implement this B.O.K.O method and really break it down to see what's really going on here. Because yes, identifying our emotions, labeling them is the first step on emotion regulation. Another question I saw pop up was when we feel stressed, sometimes we cry. And so when we cry, when we're overwhelmed, that's a physical manifestation of what we're feeling, right? So maybe not why we're crying, but what's triggering the crying, right? What do our stress levels look like? What are those prompting events? Again, using that B.O.K.O method, really breaking it down. And yeah, thank you, everybody. I appreciate, as we come to the end of our time, I appreciate everybody's willingness to participate and your attendance to, again, pencil in some time during your busy school schedules. So I appreciate your time, and that is all we have. Thank you and take care.